So today we're going to do a masterclass on the Decent Espresso machine, specifically on how to extract different flavors from your beans depending on the recipe. So we're going to start with the lever profile. Also a version of that is the traditional 9-bar profile. And that is really dialed in the hardware in traditional machines to get you chocolatey flavors from medium to dark roast beans. Now these beans we're going to be working with here are from Scotty Callahan, who's a 2-time Australian national champion winner. From the color, I would say this is a medium roast bean. In fact, there is some oil coming out of it, so some of them are a little bit more roasted. However, it's a very well executed bean, and besides chocolatey medium flavors, it's possible to get some more subtlety out of it. And that's what we're going to try and do in some of the recipes. So we'll use this bean initially to do the panorama of different recipes, and then later in the class we're going to bring some lovely light roast beans, and we're going to show how to extract those properly, because if you do those in a traditional machine, it's not so pleasant. Okay, now for everything we're doing, we're going to be using 15-gram doses, okay? And the reason we're doing 15-gram doses is because A, we're going to be drinking a lot of coffee. B, it's emerging as a quite popular choice. It's more eco to try and get more coffee out of less beans. I also feel that it's kind of cheating to do 22, 24-gram coffees and then just pull them, like say, 1-to-1, right? 22 grams in, 22, 24 grams out. Those are ultra ristrettos, and you're not really getting everything out of the bean if you do that. Now, one of the things Scott Rayo says that I didn't really understand for a while is the longer you can pull a bean out, the better it's going to taste. But that doesn't mean that if you take a bean that's say 15 in, 30 out, and now do 45, that it'll taste better. If it channels, then it's going to taste worse. So the key word is can pull it out that long. Okay? And with the charts, we have a hint as to when the bean is falling apart. So one of the key things about all espressos is all espressos end in tragedy. Okay? What I mean is every single espresso falls apart. At some point, the puck goes to hell. Matt Perger maybe will invent something that solves this problem, but until he saves us all, that is the reality. And so what we're trying to do when we're making espresso is delay that time when the puck goes to hell, so we can pull that shot longer. So when Rayo is saying the longer you can pull a shot, the better it tastes, what he's really saying is the longer you can delay the puck falling apart, the better your shot will taste. And if you put it that way, it doesn't sound that radical, right? Now, the other thing, this is more of a flavor thing, is if you pull shots shorter, you tend to have less subtlety. They tend to be easier drinking espressos. You pull them longer, you have more in the mouth, more complexity, more acidity as well. So generally, and I say just generally, you're going to pull shorter shots if you're going to put milk in them. You want less complexity, less acidity. If you're going to drink them neat, either as straight espresso or Americano, you want to pull them longer. You want more complexity, a little bit more acidity. Okay? And the recipes here are going to reflect some of that. Okay. The way we're going to do today is I'm going to pull a shot that hopefully won't be bad, and then I'm going to explain it, and then I want you guys to make it, and we're going to talk about what's going right or wrong with those shots and what we see on there. Okay? So looking at the tablet, if you are here and you tap the word for the profile, then you actually get a list of all the presets, which is this list here. Okay? And the profiles we're going to make today, we're going to start with the default profile, okay, which is essentially a lever profile. It goes up to, let's see, up to 8.6 bars, and then comes down to 6 bars if it ran the whole time. There's also a pre-infusion phase here, and I'll talk later about why that's important and why it's a good innovation. We're also going to make, and it's not on the screen right now, but we're going to make a traditional 9-bar shot, and you can show it by tapping the eyeball here, okay? And then you can say, for example, E61. That is a traditional 9-bar shot. And if I look at it, you can see it just goes straight to 9-bar, straight across. What we can do with this shot that's interesting is that we can turn it into a lever shot by having the shot go down in pressure and down in pressure in different speeds and ways, okay? And we'll make some espressos that do that, and when we start going from a straight 9-bar shot to something that decreases, we're going to taste the difference. And you're going to see that this decrease here is going to affect really the acidity and the length of the shot. So an espresso that's really falling apart, you might want to decrease the pressure here, but it's going to come at a sacrifice of extraction. There's always this relationship. I've got this unified theory of how to make espresso, okay? And it largely simplifies espresso to 2 variables. One is the solubility of the bean, which is how quickly does the bean give up materials to water. And the second is puck integrity, which is how well does it resist pressure. Those are the main 2 variables. If you start going really deep on espresso, you end up with 50 variables and you can't make any progress. It's just too complicated. The reason I focus on those 2 is that roast level, which is to say how dark your bean is, how much it's roasted, affects both those things immensely. A bean that's very lightly roasted is very poorly soluble. It doesn't give up water, the material to water very easily. Okay? It's going to need either more water contact time or more water speed in order to give up its material. If you treat a dark roasted bean and a light roasted bean with the same recipe, they won't both work. Okay? And as you go darker and darker, what's happening is that the soluble material is becoming more and more accessible to water. Okay? And the darker the roast, the faster the espresso is going to give up its material. And for reasons we don't really understand, the darker you roast the bean, the more puck integrity it has. And we don't understand why that is. And no, that's not a well understood thing. But it is absolutely a fact that if you take Italian super dark roasted beans, they can make a tiny puck that's 7 grams, and it will actually hold up. Now do that with light roast, and in 5 seconds you have vinegar. Okay? So that presents challenge because it means in order to extract those light roasted beans, we need to give them a lot of water or a long water contact time, but that's also going to promote them falling apart. And that's what makes light roasted beans so hard. It's also what makes dark roasted beans so easy. They give up the material easily and they don't fall apart. Okay. It's also why I think that this machine is our kind of the first attempt, really after Slayer and Cinezzo, to try and do something with light roasted beans, because we have to recognize the problem with puck integrity. Okay, so I am going to go in and I'm just going to use the default profile here. Okay. We're going to be using a niche grinder the whole time, and the grind is set to about 3 right now. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to pull this shot as it is now a bit too slow. Okay? And we can taste it. And what should happen is it should just be chocolatey. Okay? One other thing I'll mention is that the concentration of the coffee, what's called TDS, total dissolved solids, affects your ability to taste subtlety. And so the thicker the coffee is, the harder it is to taste things. So if we make a really slow mayonnaise-y shot, you're going to taste it and it's going to be just whack. And it might actually ruin your tongue. You might lose the ability to taste for a while. So it's totally okay. In fact, I do it, so does Rayo, to water down your espressos to taste it. There's another reason too, which is as an espresso or any drink comes down in temperature, down to 30 Celsius, you can taste more and more and more. At 30 Celsius and below, we don't taste any more. But espressos coming out of here are somewhere around 60 Celsius. If we do it in a paper cup, then they're really hot, like 80 Celsius, and you don't taste much. Right? So at trade shows, I try to get people to add cool water, and they're like, no, I want my espresso super strong, like a man drinks espresso. I'm like, okay, it's like eating, like baking chocolate, right? It's too much. So don't be afraid to be wimpy and add water to your coffee. All right, We're going to use a scale for the whole thing. And the routine's always going to be the same. We're just going to stick with 15 grams no matter what. And this cup is just about 15 grams, which makes it pretty fast to do. I'm always aiming for within 0.3. So I'm going to be a little lazy. I'm not going to go single bean dosing. And the reason I'm not worrying about it is I am also playing with the grind. So it's not like I've super dialed this in at this point. Okay. In terms of puck prep, for consistency, I'm just always going to use this portafilter stand. There is a better method, but the advantage of doing it this way is that every shot's going to be identical. Now, one thing about the niche is you can see stuff is still coming out, but I'm going to stop it because the end takes quite a long time. And if I stop it always at about the same point, then the weight's always going to be the same, right? There's still some retained grinds in here, but they're going to come out in the next shot. Otherwise, I'm adding 10, 15 seconds. I'm not going to talk about puck prep yet, except to say that I'm grooming the puck, and that'll be something we talk about later. First, I want to talk about recipes. Every single time I make a shot, I'm going to tap once, and I'm going to observe, and I'm going to criticize. Okay? So here you can see it's a bit high, and here you can see it's a bit low. Okay? It's not terrible. It's not worth redoing, but this whole area here is lower. This area here is higher. And when we make the shot, if we look in the shot mirror, I am pretty sure we're going to see the shot start toward the front, okay, and move to the back. So once you dial in your recipe, this puck preparation step is pretty much the main variable that's going to determine good and bad shots. And unfortunately, it's a huge variable.
Hey John, what's happening here? What's with all the lights?
This is our disco version right now. This is a really actually old machine. It's a 4-year-old machine. Oh. And we've pimped it up with lights because some of our customers have done so. I think.
Does it have a microphone?
It has a microphone in the back. And so it's blinking when it hears us. It's also blinking as the espresso comes out. You're good? OK. So that was a fairly slow shot. It started off at 1 mil per second and went up to about 2.5 mils per second. But that was kind of the recipe I was looking for. This lever profile is the default profile. Most of our customers are in the medium light to medium range. And this is also making an espresso that they're going to recognize as traditional. Okay? And this flow rate here to here is kind of the crucial one for the flavor. So if this goes down to about 0.5 mil per second, then we're going to get like sludge. We're going to get super thick espresso, the kind of thing that people using lever espressos sometimes really want, like melted chocolate. It will be without subtlety, but it will have really intense mouthfeel. This is kind of a in-between. What's happening here is as the puck integrity gives up, as water goes through the puck loses material. It loses about 20% of its material. And because water pressure is pushing through here, puck is losing material, the water flow rate increases. Okay? Now, we have a very, very subtle, not very big pressure decrease that's going on here. So we're rising at 8.6 bar, and then we're slowly going down, and we only got to about 7.3 bar. So just barely more than 1 bar difference. But I want to show you what that did. What it did is, as the puck first started to extract here, okay, we had a kind of constant flow rate, and then the flow rate started to speed up kind of quickly, right? Went from 1 to 2 mils per second in 10 seconds. But we started to lower the pressure, and lowering the pressure slowed the acceleration of that. Okay? And if that had kept going, then it would have reached maybe 3 mils per second at the end. The faster that flow rate goes, the less time the water is in contact with the beans, the more likely you are to get acidic, unpleasant tasting coffee. Okay? There's no golden rule as to what flow rates are good and bad, but definitely the start and end points are super important in your flavor. And if you have one that does that, right, your flow rate really accelerates, there's probably something really wrong with your puck, and it's not going to taste good. Okay? So what we're going to do is, you can see it's quite thick. Let's just give this one a little taste. But, and then for each of these, you're welcome to just press it on the pitcher rinser. Yeah, dark chocolate, right? Oh, sorry, anything else?
Orange peel.
How uneven is it? How is it reflected here?
That's a good point. I cannot see anything wrong with the puck prep in the chart. So what we should have done is look in the mirror to see.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw the espresso scale in here because it can give us insights. So I've turned the scale on. Use this one or a Kaya or a number of other scales. One thing changes, which is on the recipe, it now says stop at weight, okay, as opposed to stop at volume. And it will use the scale and it will show us what's going on. So I'm going to, that one I think stopped at 38. So the shots will stop volumetrically if you don't have a scale. And usually what I do is I use a scale initially, and then I set the volumetric to what the weight gave me. In other words, it might say 36 here, but 38 there, so I set to 38 to get 36 here. So it's not perfect. Now, I should have already weighed my dose, but what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go, I think, a full notch coarser. Okay, one full setting coarser, same exact profile, just so we can taste it. And we should get significantly more fruit, and hopefully the acidity will still be pretty tamed. And we'll see it on the charts. So when people say my espresso is not being subtle, right, or it's kind of muted, I say, first I look to see what their flow rate start to end is. And especially if it's doing that very slow start, that half mil per second, then they're way too fine. But what I just did there, 1 to 2, is what I would consider kind of optimal for a milked drink, right? Because you just got nice chocolate and a little bit of something else, and the something else, orange peel, tastes good in milk. We also have to be honest that we don't always have the world's best beans. How does that look? Not bad, but a little higher here, a little lower there. Okay, so I could be doing a better job. If you don't have the world's best beans, which is frequently the case, then you often want to work on your recipe to hide defects. Okay, and
How do you do that?
we're going to talk about that. But largely it means higher doses, shorter shots.
Okay.
Okay, largely because the more the shot opens up, the more good and bad comes out.
Okay.
The more the shot's shorter, the more you have simpler flavors. So if we look here, we look in the mirror, and we'll see the start of the shot. Okay.
How much information does the mirror shot give you?
The mirror shot, the mirror shows you the start of the shot, and it also shows you how even the extraction is. So you learn a huge amount
Okay.
by looking at the mirror. Okay, and it should, in theory, end at 38. Okay, good.
So how many grams per second?
So that was the shot here. It started at 2, and it went up to about 3.2 mils per second. So this was a significantly faster shot. Okay, and the other one was 35 seconds. This is 28 seconds to get to the same in-cup volume. So 7 seconds, about 20% faster. So what I don't know is, I think what happened is the shot stopped because we jolted the scale. Too much acidity? Yep. So I'm going to remake this one, because what it looked like to me is the shot started for 5 seconds.
More time.
No, and what happens is they end up having a huge pre-infusion time because the shot stopped and then I restarted it. So I'm making a coarser version of the default profile now. Okay. So now the flow rate is a more reasonable 1.5 mils per second. Last time it was 2. I think that long pre-infusion, the longer the pre-infusion, usually the faster the initial flow rate. Okay. And now there's the flow rate speeding up to about 3, and then it should not go above 3, hopefully. The other thing we're seeing is this shot is significantly longer. The other variable that's kind of confounding here is that even though I went coarser, this shot is pulling 2 seconds longer than the finer shot. Okay, so that's probably because my puck prep was better. So I think Celia would be a lot happier with that one. So way, way more fruity, I think, than the first one, than the 1 ml per second one. I think we can go coarser still. So this is still a pretty long espresso at 35. Okay? And this is 15 in, 30 out. We could pull it maybe a little shorter. I'm getting a little bit of kind of unpleasantness on the end. I want to try and get a fruitier version of this that's not unpleasant. Okay, so I'm just going to trim a few grams off of that from 38 to 34. So we're closer to 2 to 1.
The first shot was default with no modification.
Yeah, and that is also the shot that I make. So it's 1 ml per second start, about 2 ml per second end, and that is my standard espresso shot that I use here for milking.
Yeah.
What's the temperature of it?
So the temperature is usually 88 is throughout the shot, but I have a 90-degree start. Okay, just because the beans are at room temperature. So if I touch here, then everything is the same temperature. Okay, it's at 90. If I touch that, now I can change it. And I can, for example, set it to 88 throughout, tap here, and then just make the start a little bit hotter. Okay, so there's the start. And the start is the temperature of the group head and just the first 2 seconds. So it's really just to kickstart the bean temperature, which is room temperature, mixing with hot water, just bring it up a little bit faster at the start of the extraction. So that's an experimental feature I'm trying, and that's why this little curve right here, that's why it has this little dip there. It starts at 90 and then quickly drops to 88.
So does that make a big difference?
No. And we're really in the realm of subtlety, and this is something I added maybe 3 months ago. We're still trying to figure out when it's useful. With faster flowing shots, it's more dangerous because the faster flowing shots will bring the puck temperature up much faster because so much more water is passing through. But with really slow shots that are slow flowing, probably helps because you're not adding much water. And since the puck is 25 Celsius, the water is 90, your actual extraction is somewhere around 80 at the start.
Yeah.
And as the shot progresses, more and more 90-degree water comes in, the actual puck temperature is coming up. It's something you don't see in traditional machines. And it's part of why people don't like espresso, like real coffee pros, because the extraction temperature is starting somewhere around 80 to 90 and then ending somewhere between 90 and 95. So it's a very unequal extraction.
So that's why people with the last 10 seconds will make it lower the temperature because let it cool down a bit, so it keep it better.
Yeah, I mean, the lower the temperature, the less you extract from the bean.
Yeah.
And so lowering pressure, lowering temperature have similar effects, right? You have decreased solubility as the puck is being extracted. The remaining materials are harder to extract, and so the thinking is extract less toward the end. That's the thinking. But I could also give you the opposite theory, which is the beans are hard to extract, so we should increase the temperature.
Yes.
Right? I don't know. But I can go both ways on it. And temperature profiling is really an area that is not well understood. And I think the reason has been that people haven't been able to do it, and they haven't seen what's happening. So this is going to be again the same shot, but now we are even coarser. We've now gone 2 coarser, so from 3 to 5.
Okay.
I'm hoping that this shot will end well under 30 seconds. So it's going to still look now more like a traditional Italian espresso. Okay, and looking at the drops in the mirror.
Yeah, you can see it right here.
It looks nice.
So this is a quite long pull.
How long did it go for?
Well, it's 29 seconds, but more importantly, it was
I was over extracted.
42 grams. Okay, I wouldn't say it's over extracted. 3 to 1 is about as far as people go with espresso in terms of ratio, so 15 to 45. It smells pretty good, but I think it's going to have, I think you called it dryness. It's kind of a drip coffee kind of chalkiness that's not super pleasant. Overpulled, yeah?
Yeah.
But interesting on the nose.
It smells, it has more complex.
Yeah.
Complex, the aroma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because we're pulling it long and fast,
It's
we're getting more acidity.
expression on everything.
That's right. I want to pull the default correctly. And we put 8 grams more than we wanted in that cup. So I wanted to pull it at 34. It came out at 41.5 or so. Okay. Let's actually pull it at 34 and taste it, because we can then compare it.
I'd rather is a bit going to the medium part, because it will catch some nutty and even the aftertaste
Yes,
flavor of
yes.
the chocolate. This is coffee, this is more balance. It's good for me.
I think, so I agree with you. That I think, at least if you're running a cafe, what the public mostly wants is what I'd call chocolate plus.
Yeah.
So they want chocolate plus something else.
Yeah.
Just chocolate is already enough to make a lot of people happy. And if you're Starbucks, you just add chocolate. So solve that problem. I think the flow rate's going to be in the 2 mils per second range as this comes up. Okay, that's where it is. That's where the last shot was. So this shot is looking similar, and I think it ended at 3.5 mils per second. I stopped at 2 grams short, but that's how it is. Okay. 32 is where we came in. But that's still 15 in, 32 out would be very traditional. I think you're going to prefer that. Hopefully the over-extractedness of that is gone, that sort of chalky dryness.
The dryness is gone. Acidity shots up,
Acidity is shot up. Yep.
but much more fruity.
So for me, this acidity is controlled. It depends on what you're looking for. I agree, it is a much more acidic shot. But as a drinking espresso, I find it personally really interesting.
Yeah, I do too. I enjoy the acidity.
And for me, it's almost a fruit bomb. Like it's surprising that this is the same bean that we tasted at the start.
I'd agree, yeah.
Celia, how would you describe this one?
It's quite floral, and I think it's more balanced now of the acidity and sweetness. Yeah, but for me, I was thinking how about the aftertaste. I can cut down a little bit astringency for this coffee, but everything fine.
Okay. So I think that the astringency, personally, in terms of my theory, is because this is an uneven pre-infusion.
Oh.
Okay? Because we're doing a quite fast flow rate, but our pre-infusion's only 9 seconds, which is quite fast. So the fastest that a bean can absorb water is typically 4 mils per second. Okay? And and it needs to absorb twice as much water.
So if like that, then I need to longer the purification
Well,
time?
or use a different recipe. But you can't lengthen it, because what's actually happened here is we put water in fast enough that the pressure rose. Once the pressure rises, you can't actually pre-infuse anymore, because the puck is now compressed.
Oh, yes.
Okay? You can only pre-infuse before the puck
It already
compresses.
the maximum.
Yeah. As soon as it crosses 4 bar, it's at compressed. It's now gone. Okay?
Oh.
So if you want to do a longer pre-infusion, which if we want to get more of those floral flavors, but less unpleasant flavors, I would in this case say we want a longer pre-infusion. And the way to do that would be either to slow this pre-infusion down from 4 mils to 3 mils per second, okay, or use a different recipe. The reason that the puck is compressing so quickly is that this bean, if it's well prepared, is accepting water at the top and then is saturating, and the top of the puck is now refusing to accept water at the speed that we're giving it.
How about higher temperature?
Temperature is not going to affect the pre-infusion, but it will give you more extraction. But I think what you're finding as astringency here is because this shot is simultaneously correctly extracted and under-extracted. That the top of the puck in that first 9 seconds is getting wet, but as the shot is continuing, the bottom of the puck is now finally getting wet and is under extracted.
Oh, so
So-
actually from the bottom one.
So I mentioned when we were talking before how the Slayer shot technique I thought was the worst of all, actually. And the reason is it's this problem even worse. So the Slayer shot is very slow pre-infusion for like 40 seconds. And then as soon as you see a drip here, you start the shot. But the way the Slayer shot is working is it's dripping water here. The top then has a full 40 seconds of pre-infusion. But as soon as you see the drip on the bottom, it's only had a few seconds.
It's even worse, so very sour.
That's right. So the top is over-extracted, the bottom is under-extracted. Only the center is actually correct. So it's not a great technique. The reason that's important is that the two recipes that we're going to try now, Londinium and blooming, both address that issue. Okay? And what they're doing is, here the puck started to resist water at 9 seconds, and the shot is programmed to go to full pressure. So what the Londinium profile is going to do is go to this point and then cut the water
Cut the water.
for 10 seconds, and then continue on a shot that looks like this. So the idea is the water hits the top, the puck starts to resist, and then it keeps the pressure and pushes the water through, and then after 10 seconds, the shot rises. The other thing about Londinium is that its pre-infusion flow rate is twice as fast as this. So it's trying to avoid over-extracting the top. So put water on it as fast as possible, and then stop.
And it just, it's.
The water.
Soaking.
Yeah, and it soaks in through capillary action and pressure. It is. It is a gentle AeroPress, is what it is. And you'll see, in fact, it uses 3 bars. So if I go here to presets, Londinium. So we're going to go through a process of essentially the default recipe is the original lever recipe, and then people started seeing problems with it and solving them.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to try and solve it with this. So don't worry much about the chart, except that it does also use temperature profiling. It starts hotter, goes cooler. Okay, but when we see the shot pulled, you're going to see that 10-second pause. So because it has a longer pre-infusion, it needs a much finer grind. So in general, there's this ratio, which is the longer the pre-infusion, the faster the flow rate will be after pre-infusion. Okay, so you need a finer grind to compensate for that.
Does the profile tell you that? Or
It does.
that-
So if you go to settings here, it'll say this profile simulates a Londinium R machine, advanced profile, add steps. It doesn't say anything. So great body flavor range. So it actually doesn't say anything. This was done by a customer, Damien Brackel, who also does the DSX skin. But I have made a video about how to dial this specific shot in. And what you're going to see when the shot is pre-infusing, this one pre-infuses at 3 bar. So it fills the cavity of the group head up, and then it maintains a little bit of pressure. And the reason it does that is that it's using both capillary action and pressure to try and quickly move water through the puck. So in that way, it's also a more even pre-infusion than if you just rely on capillary action. And I'm just going to check the settings here, advanced limits. Okay, this is set for 36 grams in cup as well. Okay, I'm going to turn water volume off. It tears with the start of the espresso. So if we look at this in the mirror, okay, so now we're pre-infusing, and this thick stuff is coming out. And we're at a 3-bar pause. And I'll explain the shot afterwards, but you can see just how thick this stuff is that's coming out. And now we're getting a pressure rise. Okay? And I would say that this grind is still too coarse for Londinium. So if I look here, you can see our pre-infusion was about 1 mil per second of what I call dripping, which is quite a lot. Okay, this because here's the water coming in at 7.5 mils per second, and then the cavity fills up, pressure rises, and it just stops for 10 seconds. Then it rises to, in this case, it actually wanted to rise to 9 bar, but the grind was too coarse, so it actually only managed to rise to 7.5 bar. Right? So I would suggest, unless you have palate to spare, smell it, don't taste it, because it's too coarse. Whenever you have this dotted line, which means the goal, and you didn't reach the goal, then you're essentially gushing. And I would separate gushing from channeling. Channeling is a hole in your puck. Gushing is the whole puck is unable to resist water effectively. And our flow rate was 4 mils per second, which is so fast that it's going to take out a lot of acidity and not a lot of great coffee material. But what's nice is that this looks like a pretty espresso,
Yes.
Yes.
right? And you might be fooled either to serve it to a customer or drink it yourself. But I don't think you're going to like it. And yes, it's going to be very fruity because the flow rate. The thing is, it's going to be correctly and over-extracted at the same time, because the pre-infusion was pretty successful, right? You still had this. You had about 18 seconds where everything was kind of okay. We had a pre-infusion and a 3-bar here. So this is almost like a very fast filter coffee in terms of extraction approach, because we aren't getting much material out, and then at the end we squeeze it all out. Right. So imagine if you did a filter coffee, you let it sit there for 15 seconds, and then you poured all the water, you squeeze it all out in 8 seconds. So I've got another one setting coarser, because the previous one was not that far off. I'm hoping will be 35 seconds or so. So now we're getting a bit more dripping here. Okay, and that looks about right in terms of what I'm expecting. And I'll show you on the chart, you can actually see the weight of those drips. So if you end up being able to understand how much dripping you want during the pre-infusion phase, and you say, oh, I want 6 grams worth, then you know you've dialed in correctly. You can see that afterwards on the chart.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think this one's good.
Yep, so 32 seconds. That's where I want it to be, more traditional espresso. By the way, in terms of temperature, you can see this is very effective at getting the temperature up quickly, because there's a lot of water very quickly and then pressure to push it throughout the puck. So it's not a gentle pre-infusion at all. It's trying to be very even. And then here, this line right here, this dotted line, is actually the total weight. And if you tap here or here, you can zoom. Okay? And during the pre-infusion phase, which ends right here, I can go there and I can see what we had. So we only had, this was 0 to 1, we only had maybe 3 grams. That's where that line is in the cup at that point. Okay? But that's useful to know if it turns out that's our grind. So here we were, our pre-infusion, and typically I'm expecting pre-infusion Londinium to be about ½ mil per second when it's dialed in. All right, so this is nice. It didn't have any problem. Oh, no, it did. It actually did not manage to hit 9 bar. Okay, but it did hit 8.5 bar. Flow rate's a bit fast. Let's see how it tastes. Okay, this might be fine. Don't know. What I'd like to see, Celia, is whether we got any of that floral nature back, or if we're just not going to get it with this profile.
Yeah, you get a little bit more the floral.
We're losing the orange peel. And I think because we weren't able to hit our target pressure and the flow was too fast, we got a lot more acidity. This is much less pleasant than the previous one. Right? But I think that that's too much to expect from Londinium. Londinium is about big mouthfeel, orange plus.
I'm guessing, I'm still thinking the first recipe. We have big milk. Yeah. I think the default one that we are talking about is 4 per second, is that right?
Yeah.
Then if you lower to 3 per second, I think it's rich.
Yeah. I mean, default is, that's my favorite recipe. It's the one I made. It's the one I use the most. And it is a lever profile, I think. And these beans are kind of specialty medium light beans, which are exactly targeted at a lever machine. Right, so that profile is the right profile for this. I think that actually these beans are not entirely appropriate for Londinium. Londinium is more medium to medium dark, getting huge mouthfeel.
It's about the roasting level. Oh, I see.
Really thick espresso. That's what they're trying to do with that. All right, so next we're going to try a totally different approach. We're going to try the blooming espresso. Now, blooming and Londinium are not that different. What blooming is has the same idea with pre-infusion, which is water quickly on the puck and then stop. Slight difference, the blooming doesn't add any water. It just holds the pressure and pushes the water in. Okay? You'll get more dripping with blooming than you do Londinium. It demands an even finer grind, and the pre-infusion is 30 seconds of pause instead of 10. So blooming is really more for light roast. Okay? It will work with this. It's also going to give us more in the cup, and it's not really for making an espresso that you milk. It's really for opening it up. However, it is a difficult espresso to master because you need a very fine grind. The long pre-infusion will tend to cause the puck to flow quickly and fall apart. But for certain beans, it's genius. Okay? It might work with this. Now, I'm going to go, however, quite a bit finer. I was at 3 on my niche for default. I'm at 1 right now for blooming. I could be wrong. It'll take a few to dial in. The other thing that's really hard about blooming is that long pre-infusion, you don't really know if you're going to hit your pressure at the end. And generally, if espresso is made under 6 bar or over 10 bar, it's no good. Okay? Over 10 bar, it's double compressed and it's very muted. Under 6 bar, like peak pressure I'm talking about, peak pressure of under 6 bar, generally you're getting more acidity. Under 4 bar, the puck isn't even compressed. So a 3 bar espresso is actually just a gusher. It's a fast filter coffee. You can make espressos at 4 or 5 bar, and certainly coming down to that works. The Sweet and Gentle profile that's here is a 6 bar shot, and it's meant to be either light roast or bad grinder, because the lower pressure makes it easier to make. Okay. Or the person is just not good at preparing pucks. That's why I recommended it as the first espresso you make. How many bars on this? This is not that kind of espresso. So the end of blooming is flow controlled, but which is partially what makes it difficult. Is that go ahead? You want it? And the reason the end is flow controlled, Celia, is because it spent already 40 seconds in pre-infusion. And so most of the coffee material is already, yeah, so that is a pretty good puck. What's interesting is the finer I'm grinding it, the higher it's going up the basket, right? The more space it takes. And this is still, remember, a 15-gram dose. Okay. Typically, so blooming is a really long shot, typically 72 seconds to make an espresso. So it is also the approach that gets the absolute highest refractometer ratings on the planet. So typically 23 to 25% extraction rates, as opposed to a normal cafe bar would be 19 to 21. Okay. So very, very high. Generally, like Rayo will do Kenyans, light roast Ethiopians with this. Things that are more expensive, that are filter coffees, is what he would do with this recipe. Generally, it's also going to favor larger burrs, like a really nicely aligned EK or something like that, a monolith. Though the tamping pressure just is not a relevant variable. And I was really surprised at that. But years ago, I was visiting La Marzocco, and they said their research was 5 pounds or more, all equivalent. And then Socratic Coffee, Joe from Socratic Coffee was here at one point, and he challenged me. He said, just put a tamper like that and make a shot and see. And it was the same as normal. So, and the reason is, at this point, this shot is at 140 pounds per square inch of pressure. So that much is getting 140 pounds. So 30 pounds on that is nothing. Okay? So I'm looking at how much drippage I have, and I've got a bit more dripping this time. And hopefully I'm going to get to like 6 to 8 mils as the pressure rises. And that's just my number in my head that I've known gets me the kind of blooming that I like. Okay? Because if it's too coarse, the water's not flowing everywhere. Okay, so there we are. We're at 5. So I maybe could go a little coarser, maybe not. We'll see. So, and then pressure-wise, I've only peaked at 5. mils per second, 5 bar. But the pressure is not crashing. So this is constant flow. And if the pressure crashes, it means I'm channeling. So this is now a nice linear reduction. And there we go. Okay. And this is a 3-to-1 shot. So 15 in, 45 out. Okay. And still looks nice.
Yeah.
If you want to, it actually smells a bit muted. I'm showing you this technique, and it can work with this bean, but it's really not meant for it. It's meant for a lighter roast, because a 40-second pre-infusion is trying to work with a poorly soluble bean. For me, that's really controlled the acidity, right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't have much complexity.
No,
Yeah.
it's like a little flat.
Yeah,
but
like
no
a-
acidity.
Celia's brought her own beans. Let's try it. Want to smell the beans?
Ooh, that's really good.
So nice.
Oh yeah.
Really good.
It comes out like strawberry, raspberry, not small.
Okay.
Okay, puck, okay. But the pressure's holding. So one of the things I also look for when blooming is after pre-infusion and I stop the pressure valve, does this pressure crash? If the pressure crashes, it's bad puck prep. Okay, so the puck is really holding its integrity nicely here. So this shot might be okay. Okay, there's our pressure shooting up. Okay, I'm really happy with that pressure.
Yeah.
That was 9.2 bar.
9.
And now what I want to see is whether this pressure decline here is nice and linear or if it crashes. Okay, and we're holding at 6.5 bar, even though we're constant flow, and you can see it even looks nice. Right? At no point did it start to channel. Now what I could do is lengthen this if I want some more, to get more in the cup. Okay, we're back to blooming. Hopefully a little bit coarser. Back to your Da Vinci's. Okay, and then the last one we're going to do is the allongé style, which is more like an Americano, and it's just going to bring out fruit. Okay, let's see what the dripping looks like here. Okay, I'm at 4 grams. And again, remember, I was looking for like 6 to 8 grams of drip. It tells me that my grind is dialed in. Okay, so there we are at 6 grams. So I'm hoping that when this now pressure rises, this should be a good expression of the blooming style. Whether this bean is the right bean for this is a different issue. This is a longer pull, there's more water. This is more typical of blooming, less crema.
Not much mottling or tiger stripe.
No, 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 not at all, because it's not a thick espresso.
Yes.
It's just like the exact opposite of lever. This is all about addressing solubility and getting more water through it in order to get, this is the highest extraction currently recipe on the planet.
It has a bit, but it's so thorough. Pretty. Actually, it's very good.
This actually smells good. You just open the bag.
But just like,
It's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's good.
Like the smell from the bag.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a really hard recipe to dial in. I use those drips to try and figure out if I've got it right. So 6 to 8 grams before the pressure rises. I can also see it here if I zoom here. This was my end of pre-infusion here, and I can look. This is 1 gram, right? So 10 rather. So here I was around 6, 7 grams. This line here is total shot weight. Okay. So at that point, when the pre-infusion ended, I look there, I go over here, somewhere around 6, 7 grams. That's where I was. And then I come down here. There's what the shot looked like.
because I'm really not very good on
Yeah, yeah.
graphic. And this is from starting.
So this is time 0.
Time.
The dark brown line is what's going into the cup,
Oh.
right? And you can see there were some drips right away. But drips is just part of blooming. Blooming is a weird technique.
So how long is it total? It's,
Total shot time was 66 seconds.
ooh.
I know.
And then.
So let's walk through this one, okay? So pre-infusion here, pre-infusion was 4 mils per second, and it lasted about 10 seconds right here, okay? This is just filling the cup because pressure went up. And then pressure hit almost 6 bar, and then the machine just stopped water completely. That's what the blue line down here is. No more water. Pressure then just pushed the water throughout the puck, and as it did so, we got some dripping out the bottom, and the puck is very evenly wet. And what you'll notice is if you look at the bottom of the puck, you would have seen water very early on the bottom. So it's really a very even extraction. That's why the refractometer ratings are so high. And then at the end of a 30 seconds on top of the 10 seconds, so about 40 seconds total, flow comes up, and then pressure is something. Pressure is whatever it is at that point. Okay? And at this point, pressure was 2 bar. All right, let's do that same bean, and let's try and do it with allongé, which is the rayon allongé. Okay? And the rayon allongé is not so hard to dial in because it's very fast flow, and it's quite coarse. So you don't need the world's best grinder. The trick with the rayon allongé is you want to be between 6 and 10 bar. Okay? If you aren't, then you're just actually gushing. And so it's quite hard to do this shot on a traditional machine because they don't usually have a pressure gauge that tells you real pressure. They just say 9 bar, but your beans might be 1 bar, and you don't know. Okay? So I've gone quite coarse on this. I'm not going to waste your beans because we don't have a lot of them. I'm going to just check with mine first and see if it's okay. I think yours need to be a little finer grind than mine because yours are lighter roast than mine. So the first time I made this for someone else, it was at Square Mile in the UK, and Hoffman was not around. It was all his staff, and I was delivering the machine to them, and they looked at it and went, "Oh God, that's a gusher. That's going to be terrible." And then everyone tasted it and went, "Huh, this just violated everything we know about espresso. This really should not have been drinkable." But the reason it's drinkable is because you achieve pressure and the flow you want. But if you don't achieve pressure, you are just making a very fast channeled filter coffee.
Yes.
Okay, so what I don't know is, let's see what the pressure does here. And it looks to me like it's overpressure.
So allongé was the
Okay.
pressure?
Yeah, so the green is the pressure, and I'm overpressure. So I am currently too finely ground.
11.
But it's not too bad. But it's coming out really evenly, right? I'm not channeling, I'm not spraying. Okay, and I am going to stop it there. So I want to go still faster. So that in the end was just 37 seconds, 41 out, not actually that different from a normal espresso. Right? And it's going to be muted because at about 10 and a half bar, the puck goes through another compression. And the flavors really get muted at that point. Okay? And you kind of see something strange happen here between 11 bar and 9.5 bar. Like, it's not clear, right? And this is really kind of the cutting edge of espresso right now, is what's happening with secondary compressions. So I think this is going to be too concentrated. So allongé gets you perfume and fruit bomb, typically. But we can do better.
But it just got smell good, but not sweet.
Not sweet, but quite open.
Yeah, quite open.
It's open, but yeah. A little flat, I would say.
Mhm.
Not a whole lot of.
Not a lot of complexity, yeah. All right, I'm going to do it again. So this is fast as well, but I'm still seeing too high pressure. I want to go coarser still. Okay. So, and I'm actually aiming for 60. I'm actually aiming for 4-1 with allongé. So it really is more like Americano.
Yeah, perfect.
But it's getting better. So what you're tasting is the effect of increased flow rate while still maintaining pressure. And that increased flow rate is going to be diminishing your chocolate flavors, increasing your floral and your fruit. I'm only using 15 grams.
Because when you close up, then you relax access of some others.
Yes.
Whereas you in the acid aroma.
Yeah. I'm trying to get my head around because it's increased the contact time. So So even though it's gone coarser, you would think, oh, it would go faster.
I've not increased the contact time. I've increased the flow rate.
Oh, yes.
But it has more or less the same effect,
Yeah.
right? So, but the difference is that think of water as a solvent. It's the universal solvent, right? And with something like blooming, I let a 30-second pause happen, but that coffee goes into the water almost immediately, and then the water has used most of its solvent potential, right? And so the more and more concentrated that water gets, the less effective it is at extracting coffee. Right? There's the Chinese tea technique, right, of 30-second extractions, clean water every time.
Yes.
The clean water each time extracts a maximum, as opposed to, let's say, 2 minutes of the same water. So something like blooming is not using water at its maximum extractive potential, because it's the same water for 40 seconds. When you're putting a lot of water through, it's constant fresh water going through. Now, what you lose is concentration. You end up with much more in the cup, so you don't get a thick body. But you are extracting far more out of the bean. So this is something that Allongé is one of my favorite recipes, because I have never been a fan of light roast beans because they've always been too acidic and too hard to extract.
It just can more longer time.
Yeah.
I mean, longer, also the flow rate.
The flow rate, yeah. So I love this recipe because give me a filter coffee bean that is always incredibly acidic with espresso. I make it this way, and then the acidity goes way down, and it's incredibly expressive. But it's not really espresso anymore.
Yeah.
So what?
Yes, it's almost in between, right?
It is.
It's in between. I mean, you can say a small Americano.
Yeah.
That's what I felt as well.
So in terms of TDS, we're around 6%. Okay, so so we're still much higher than a drip coffee would be, but we're not in the 9 to 12%, right, of an espresso, of a thick espresso. And once I get this dialed in, then we'll switch to the beans it was really meant for. But I think we can make a delicious coffee with this style and these beans. Okay, now sound-wise, I'm a lot happier. I can hear the motor really moving, which is what I'm looking for. I'm looking to get a fast flow rate here. Okay, and then pressure-wise, I'm a lot happier. This is around 8 bar now, 7.5 bar. So we're not going to mute the coffee like we were before when we were up 10, 11, 12 bar. And so I'm stopping at 65. It's a 4-to-1 ratio on this. Okay, almost 5-to-1. But what's cool is that because we had pressure, we have crema.
Yes.
So it still looks like an espresso, but you'll see body-wise, it's going to be much thinner. So for me, on the nose, it's really interesting. Like maybe the most interesting of these beans.
It's like tea more now.
Yes.
I like this. This is good.
Yeah, and also I think the TDS is now under control. This is like a strong coffee. It's not really espresso anymore.
Yeah.
And that thickness of espresso is gone.
Yeah.
And it's hard to believe this is the same as the chocolatey one that you made your latte from.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it with the beans it was meant for.
But you should have another name.
Now, I like this also because in a cafe, you can make a good-sized drink in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Because it's fast flow rate, you've got your little artisan roast.
So this is more accessible for people like who are used to filter, maybe not
Yes.
gone to the level of espresso. You know, this is right up their street, you know, maybe a bit stronger, right? So,
Yeah. It's in between.
yeah.
Okay, that's quite fast. I can hear the pump. It's the fun thing about this, it's like a motorcycle. You can kind of
Yeah.
judge the flow rate. Now,
Made me aware of that. Instead of
so we really are getting a 40 mil per second flow rate now, and I'm going to stop this at 30 seconds. Okay, and so this 15 in, 80 out. Right, this is really going to be a lot more dilute, but we still, look at the insane amount of crema on what is actually a fairly light roast.
and the color of it too. Right?
Yeah, it's
You'd
beautifully
expect-
pale,
yeah.
actually.
It's not from here.
I
can
told
smell it
you,
from here.
when you start smell it, then you will have a sesame come out. But it's so fruity altogether. Jackfruit and
Yes. Oh, I can smell the jackfruit now you say it.
it tastes very nice.
It's very nice.
Yeah. So yellow fruit more.
Yeah.
Tropical.
Yeah.
Yeah, and jackfruits. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's just fruit bomb, right?
Yeah.
It's
It's so good.
so that's what I like allongé for, is expressing the bean in this very crazy way. That's still an espresso machine.
Nice.
I also warn you, always put it in ceramic
Yeah,
because
and
it's so
50
hot.
gram.